What's going on, Star Wars fans?
Hello there.
Welcome back. We're doing Star Wars Jedi Chat Live again this week. Hello, Ron. Oh, you can do
I'm
more than
not at
that.
home, as everybody can tell. I'm
Yeah.
away, so I'm going to jump on here for a little bit. And Nick's going to host it tonight, so super excited about that. So yeah, it's been a pretty good week. Not a lot of Star Wars stuff coming out. I know you're going to touch on a bunch of things here on the comments, which will be pretty cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think there was too much stuff. The Kenobi seems to be getting some legs, so
Yeah.
I'm super excited about that.
And as we know, you don't really know until Lucasfilm does something
Right.
sketchy, but they will. It usually goes this way, rumbles a little bit, as it did for the first one.
Yeah.
We were supposed to get a Kenobi movie, and then turned out to be a big long movie, split in 6 pieces.
Yeah.
But for those who are on with us, we are going to be doing a little bit different today. We're going to do a little Q&A type thing. Ron graciously teed me up with a Rush song in our Instagram posts. I appreciate that. We're going to talk deep dives. I do want to say, as I was telling you, Ron, before, despite our title on the video, we are not affiliated or trying to steal the thunder of the YouTube account Star Wars Theory. We're just talking Star Wars lore and theory. So if you've come here thinking that we're talking to them, or that we're like trying to take things off of the show or whatever, we're just talking Star Wars theory and lore. That's it. So just want to say we're separate entities. This is not a joint show or anything like that. But Ron, we were just talking beforehand. You have started watching some stuff again. Do you want to talk about what you're doing?
Yeah. I started Clone Wars again, but I started watching it in the way that I guess it was supposed to be watched, or I'm not sure exactly how you want to say that, but obviously, you can watch it seasons 1 through 7, no problem, and I really think it makes sense. But the way I'm watching it, I've actually started doing the skipping around. So I watched the movie first, and then it was like season 3, episode 3, however it was. It just jumps around a little bit, which is pretty cool because some of the episodes actually match up pretty well together. So I've done that for the first season right now. I'm still working on season 1, but I have had a couple different episodes from season 3 and season 2. And then I'll start to flip around a little bit again. I think in season 2 or 3, there's like, ones that get popped in there, which is pretty cool. So I've liked watching it that way. Again, I love the Clone Wars, so it's fun just to go back and watch it again. I mean, I still pick up things that I haven't picked up before, or remember things as well. And then I'm doing double at this point. So I also started watching Skeleton Crew again. So I'm about halfway through that. So it really is very enjoyable. It's lighthearted. I still am like, I forget about, what's going to happen to the kids, or SM-33, I think, is really a great droid that they brought into this mix. So I think that's really cool. And the kids do such a good job. And again, there's rumors now, with all this stuff coming up, that we could possibly see these kids or even Jude Law again in some Star Wars stuff, which I think would be fantastic.
Well, yeah, you can't, At-Aten seems like a pretty important planet to just throw in, with all of its riches and stuff at a very inconvenient time for it to be around, or convenient, depending on who you are. So I was asking him beforehand, but I figured we'd leave it for the show. What made you want to watch Skeleton Crew again? Because I know you were just watching The Acolyte. I knew that you were already doing the chronological Clone Wars viewing, which, for those who don't know, you can watch Clone Wars front to back and it's still going to be great, and you'd almost never know it wasn't in order, because they're just fun adventures, but they're not in order in true Star Wars fashion. So I knew you were doing that. But what made you want to start watching Skeleton Crew again?
I don't know. I think it's the third time. I think I watched it when it first came out, obviously, and then jumped on again a few months later. Just to, it's usually what I'll do is once it comes out, I'll watch it when it comes out, obviously, and then
Mhm.
I'll try to binge it or at least catch up, whether it's Kenobi or Andor or Mandalorian. You do that as well. But I haven't watched that recently, so I wanted to check that out again. I thought it was a good story. I think it might tie in a little bit with Ed Atton, like you were talking about with the money.
Mhm.
I don't think that they put that in there just to put it in there.
For no reason.
We're gonna get, I think we're gonna get Ed Atton or something from Skeleton Crew in one of these next couple movies or live actions.
Yeah.
Whether it's in Mandalorian and Grogu, I'm not sure. I don't think it would have anything to do with Kenobi,
Yeah.
but Ahsoka possibly just because of Thrawn, coming back and needing some cash to start up, his reign or whatever
Yeah.
he's gonna do.
And the First Order for that matter. How did they get all their stuff? We kind of
Right.
know, but um, yeah. So I also, it's kind of good timing that you did that because I saw, I think yesterday or today, Tony Gilroy said in an interview that he loved Skeleton Crew. Tony Gilroy, for those who don't know, wrote Andor. Um, did help, I think, finish and redo Rogue One back in the
Yep.
day. Um, and what I think he said about, I'm paraphrasing, but he loved that Skeleton Crew is lighthearted, like you said, but it stuck to what it was the whole time. He said it never deviated from how it wanted to feel, and neither did Andor. So I think
Yeah.
I can see why he's into that. So, Ron, do you mind if I take our current viewers through what our ideas for today?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for that. And then because it looks like Austin and Jacob are on there and they're super excited about the
Yeah.
Great Jedi. Now, Austin, if you're still here and listening, I don't know why you're not on here with us because we're just sitting around talking Star Wars. So there's no reason for you to jump on here. There's
There's
Mom
Lane.
Powell
There's
or
Lane.
Dad Powell.
What's up, Dad?
So
He's
yep.
golfing.
Nice.
Um, I
Nice.
found
Hopefully he's got his Jedi chat mug out there with him again.
yeah. Well, that was
Oh, okay.
that one. Yep, that was
We'll
me.
have to send him some. We'll have to send him
Yeah,
some shirts too.
yeah. They'll rep them. Um, so the plan for today is more of maybe a little bit of Q&A, but I came up with a couple of topics to get the ball rolling. So when we get people in the chat, I think the point is maybe we don't even have to use my topics because we're all talking and going through some things. But I took Ron's gracious tee up on Instagram that I have some hot takes or deep dives and stuff. And if you go into the chat and scroll all the way up, I said vote for a topic. And I put 3 topics in there that I could go on for hours about. And I'll try not to, but I'll go on for as much as you want. So seems like we have a consensus at where we want to start with Nick's Great Jedi rant as I put it up there. Before we start,
While you're doing that, I'm gonna try to look and see if we can figure out how to put some of these polls up as well. So
okay,
do your
cool.
thing.
I do, before I get going on that, I want to let everybody that's watching know that we have we've said it before, but our first partner of the podcast called Jabba's Toy Palace. They primarily deal in replica lightsabers that are battle ready. Ron and I just kind of stumbled across it at the Nashville Comic Con. And if you go check out their website, um, you'll see that they make a lot of lightsabers. And one of these days we'll have them on. They might come on tonight. Um, but check it out. They do really good work. They talk to us about how they make them, their experience with going around the country selling them, people using them for like even recreational sport with them, like the dueling that you see on the internet. So check it out. It's pretty cool. Hopefully we can get some in Ron's studio and test them out for you on camera. But All right. Are we at a consensus that you want the next Gray Jedi rant?
I think so.
All right. So why don't we do this? So Ron, you can start, and then everyone in the chat can put in their thing. If you want to just go in there and define Gray Jedi, please do. And Ron, so like when you hear the term Gray Jedi, like in all the legends or whatever, or what people say, what would you define it as?
Um, I almost sort of in between. I think for me as a great Jedi, I don't almost walking the line. I know some people have referred to some of the other Jedis as great Jedi. I think that for me, a great Jedi could possibly be like a Mace Windu, um, because he obviously is a very powerful Jedi, but the style of that he uses for fighting, I think, is a dark style, and I also think that he's walking that line, which everybody can do as long as you don't cross that line into the bad side, or if you're a Sith, you don't cross that line into the good side. But I think it's something that can be played on both sides. Maybe Quinlan Voss as well.
Mm-hmm.
His whole thing. If you guys haven't read that book yet, it's fantastic.
Dark
But
Disciple.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's really good. And definitely if you have or haven't watched Tales of the Underworld, it's a great book to read before you watch that because it has Asajj and Quinlan in it.
Mm-hmm.
And no spoilers here, but it's been out long enough that there's so many people that are you know already seen the underworld, but we know that Kenobi and Quinlan, take her back to Dathomir. So I think that's a really good book to go into before that. And I
Mm-hmm.
also feel like it brings you and it shows you where Quinlan actually does cross that line,
Yeah.
and then obviously he comes back. So when you first said Gray Jedi, I also thought of the guards with those masks
Yeah.
that have the little crosses on them. Um, that have I don't know if they're actually lightsabers or what they are. I forget, but that also sort of reminds me of a great Jedi. Um, but yeah, I think it's sort of somebody that's in between there. And maybe Ahsoka. I don't think she's that much a dark side,
Mm-hmm.
but she's not. I'm not a Jedi. That's what
Right.
she says. So maybe not because she's not a Jedi, but I think it's somebody in between there. So.
Anyone in the chat want to add to that definition?
Austin, I'd
Um,
be interested to hear your
yeah. I like
definition.
I'm with you on. We talked about it last time we all got on. So maybe was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? We were talking about Ahsoka and Dooku.
Yeah,
Um, I think we kind of landed on the point that Ahsoka, even though she left the institution, she's still a Jedi. Even though she says she's not, she still acts
yeah.
like it. Which kind of brings me to my point. But I actually have three. Oh, here we go, Austin. Mm, mm.
Interesting.
So let's. I'll put that back up later because that has to do with what I'm going to say. Um, I have three definitions for a gray Jedi. You want to hear them?
Absolutely.
So the first definition is similar to what you just said. So I think the first definition is what we all um, would think of what the gray means. Like you have light, dark, and then the middle, right? Kind of ride the line. I think when most people talk about gray Jedi, they're thinking something along those lines. Like Mace Windu clearly kind of dips in and out. Um, that same with Quinlan Voss. It's not easy and it's not something everybody can do. You mentioned Ahsoka. I think that first definition is everything you said, riding the line, um, Good guy that occasionally does bad things for the right reasons, I think is what a lot of people say they mean by it. So that first definition is whatever the Wikipedia definition is, that's what everybody wants to believe they think. The second definition comes from people who I think get obsessed with it. And I think the second definition is what people say number one, but they really think number two, which is cool character that I like can do anything they want and have no consequences for it. So, and it has something to do with what Austin just said here. Becomes a little bit of a cop out. I agree with Austin. So that's like the second definition. I think when we talk about like Qui-Gon Jinn as a gray Jedi, I get it, but that's not really, he's not out here like, actually murdering people, and all that kind of
Sure.
stuff. He just kind of bends the rules but it's all in service to his belief in the Jedi fundamental premise. I think there's a cost associated with the dark side. I think George Lucas and Dave Filoni set out for a cost by turning to the dark side. It kind of wrecks you. It's very tempting. It consumes you. I don't think many people, if ever, can ride the line and not get sucked into it. Mace Windu's like pretty unique for that, actually. And even he was in the act of doing it. He was in mid backswing of murdering the leader of the free world to everyone else's knowledge, when he probably shouldn't have. So I think definition two is when people get a little excited about my cool favorite character can do whatever they want and not have any consequences for it. And that gets real weird. And I think that gets sort of blurry and gives this gray Jedi thing its sort of sour taste. Number three definition is my definition for it, is that what we think of the gray Jedi is what Jedi are actually supposed to be. We've talked about that with Mike. So Ahsoka is a great example. Ahsoka says she's not a Jedi anymore because she left the temple. She left. She's no longer a part of the organization. She lives the rest of her life as a Jedi, for sure. She's a servant to people. She might kind of make the wrong choices and everything, at times, but there's no mistaking she's a Jedi. And I think Qui-Gon's just the way Jedi are supposed to be. People call him Gray Jedi all the time. I think he's just the way the Jedi are supposed to be. And there are very few people around that time that we see in the movies that are capable of doing that. And it's outside of the code or the organization. But the thing that we consider a Gray Jedi and the cool legend stuff is just what they actually are. And that's the difference, I think, between the prequel Jedi Order as an institution and the Gray Jedi that we love to play around with in our minds. Is that is a Jedi, but the stuff we see is really eroded and kind of rotted away.
Yeah.
So that's my.
Well, and I had the thing up here, which I really think you hit it on the head with Qui-Gon, because again, he's one of the ones that is considered, and I put them all up there, but it's because he defied the council, but he still followed the living force.
Yeah.
So again, the council might not be
it's artificial.
the right way. Right.
Yeah.
Right. In the way that we see what happens, during these movies, and we see how it falls, and we see what happens in the Acolyte, and we see what happens in Clone Wars, and even now as I'm watching I meant the movie, but even now as I'm watching Clone Wars, the animated series, there's so much stuff that Dooku and Palpatine push forward. And what's going to happen for this battle and that battle, and Padme coming out in Maleficent, and Dooku takes her. I mean, Grievous takes her captive.
The
And
Malevolence.
Malevolent, yeah. Sorry, I was thinking Disney's witch.
That's right.
So that was I thought that was cool how they do that in reference to pretty much everything that goes on.
Hmm.
Palpatine knows because he's obviously, you know, the emperor, but he's the senator and he's all these things, and nobody knows who he is yet, and he's
Hmm.
given Dooku all this information.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting to see how that unfolds. Where I almost think Dooku could have been a great Jedi if he didn't go to the dark side.
Yeah. But
You
I
know,
would even push back and say even if he left and didn't become a Sith Lord, that's just Jedi stuff, man. In my opinion, like he was
yeah,
following. That's just what Ahsoka did, and I just think like we get this conception almost in like a video game way of like I get to play as Luke Skywalker and learn Force lightning and
right,
kill all these stormtroopers for fun, like, and then but there's no consequence, and it's like the most powerful part of Luke Skywalker is not his power, it's his restraint despite that power, which is what makes
yep,
him like one of the greatest Jedi ever. You know, he could literally dominate the whole thing himself and he chooses not to because it's not his responsibility. He's responsible with it. And so I think this idea of like gray Jedi using, the dark side a little bit. I'm going to put this up here. Jacob is on a point that you made earlier. Like, I don't think Mace Windu's a very good Jedi, to be honest with you. And I do think he's the best example in the films of what a gray Jedi would be. I think Mace Windu's a little bit of a authoritarian, if you will. Despite like I don't understand why I get it because it adds some confusion, but like in Phantom Menace, he's kind of an asshole on the council. And then in Attack of the Clones, he's the only voice of reason on the council for out of nowhere. And then in Revenge of the Sith, he's an even bigger asshole. But uh we all love him because he's cool and he's powerful and he is, what I say all the time, he's correct about almost all of it. He's just not necessarily doing the right thing. So he's not right, but he's correct. He's correct. Anakin's a very dangerous person. He's correct. He was correct when he told him you can't come with. You're way too confused right now. This is not good for you. And so Anakin doesn't go with him. He's correct, but the right thing to do would have been come with us. Let's call everybody and that sort of thing. But um anyway, I don't think Mace Windu in terms of like if you're putting him up against Luke or uh I would say like later Yoda or Qui-Gon. My opinion, Qui-Gon's like the man, which will lead me to another one of the topics up top. I think Qui-Gon's just such a good example of what Jedi should have been. And I think that is like the great Jedi definition. I feel like Mace Windu is like is in there to represent like what the Jedi became. Because he could be Yoda-esque, but he's so like politically dug in. And like I use I'm gonna use the word again, authoritarian in a way. Trying to control everything. And you know, despite the fact I'll give him a shout out, he's the only one talking sense into Yoda in Attack of the Clones the whole
true.
time. So I gotta hand that to him. And he's very, very, very cool, and I want to see more of him. But um,
All right, I want you to get on that one.
I argue not to go to the dark side. I don't think so. I agree that that's impressive. I don't think he has. I think that's almost like his thing. Like he found out that he's got a tolerance to it through his, the story. I don't know. I think this is still legends. They haven't made it canon, but like his master freaked out. And his master like tried to learn this lightsaber form that Mace uses that dips in and out of the dark side, and he had to fight his master because he turned and he fell for it. I feel like it's less about Mace Windu just being powerful, but more that he like honed in on that skill. Um, I think I agree with Austin in terms of power. I don't agree in terms of like representing the philosophy and being a Jedi. Um, but again, Attack of the Clones Mace Windu is, he is everything you want him to be. He's the Qui-Gon of episode 2.
Yep.
He starts the movie. He says directly to the Chancellor, "We're not soldiers. Don't even think about it. You negotiate your way out of this. We're not doing this," which is what should have been from the get-go. He tells Yoda, "Hey man, we can't see through the Force anymore. We can't really use it. We have to tell the Senate this isn't good." And Yoda's like, "Nope." He tells Obi-Wan, "Hey man, I know it's hard training Anakin, but you got to relax. He's the chosen one." Like, all of these things are like Qui-Gon things, which
Right.
lines that should probably have been given to Yoda, honestly, given where we go in Revenge of the Sith. But so I agree, he is it for one movie. But and I sympathize with him because I think he's correct the whole time. They just kind of are between a rock and the hard place with every decision and don't really get their way out of it. But anyway, so that was basically my Gray Jedi rant. If anyone has more to go, in closing, we have the Gray Jedi definition. I think a lot of people, particularly on the internet, are a little too in the rabbit hole on the Gray Jedi thing, because we need consequences in these stories, and the consequence is you can't dabble in the dark side too long, or else you're done. And I just think, like, the thing that we want Gray Jedi to be is what the Jedi actually are. They just kind of failed at being that. So, Jacob, there's a conversation to be had of, would the color of the saber represent the class of the Force sensitive character? Blue equals pure Jedi, red equals pure Sith. Yeah, used to be a thing. I don't know. And then he asks, would a white saber represent people closest being a gray? I would think so, right? Nowadays, the canon on lightsaber color is just like, they meditate with it and it emits a certain color forever unless you make it bleed, and then it turns red. And then if you purify it from bleeding, then it turns white, and then it's white forever. That's the new canon. I do know, once upon a time, Knights of the Old Republic style, the color represented like what your strengths were, or like your class, as Jacob said. I'm sure there's something about that. Like, it seems not on accident, even though it was an accident where Samuel L. Jackson just asked George Lucas for a purple one. But like, Mace Windu kind of dipping in and out has a purple lightsaber seems like a good way to go for personality. The real story is just that he wanted one and George Lucas did it. But, I think they might come through with that, especially we're seeing more yellows and all that. We see Balin Skull's like orange, and he's kind of like a weird in-betweener. What do you think about that,
Yeah.
Ron?
And so is Cal Kestis, and that's what I just looked up because
Mhm.
I knew they had them. And I'll just go, while we're here, I'll go ahead. And so blue, the meaning is valor, duty, and combat skills. So again, you have Anakin, Obi-Wan, Kanan, they all have that. The green is wisdom, harmony, and deep force connection. So you have Yoda, Luke, Qui-Gon for those. White is purity and naturality and independence, obviously Ahsoka. Red, we all know, anger, power, control. With the Sith. Yellow is balance and protection. So the Jedi Temple Guards and Rey,
Mhm.
which is interesting, I think. Purple, like you said, mastery of both light and dark aspects of the Force,
Mm.
and that's Mace. Orange is ambiguity. I think
Ambiguity.
that's it,
Yeah.
and independence and balance, and that's Cal Kestis.
Mm.
Um, Black is the dark saber, is what they're referring to, obviously, and that's leadership, power, and the Mandalorian legacy. But the
Mm.
the, the blue and the green were the ones that I've always consider, because those were the ones that were in the OGs, but along
Yeah.
with the red. But the blue being the valor, the duty, the combat skills, where the green is the wisdom, harmony, and deep force connection
Hmm.
is what the definitions for that are.
Well, and
So those are the things that I think is are pretty cool.
yeah, I like, there's cool stories now. And again, like there's a lot of cool stories that come out of the books and comics that for some of these movies that for whatever reason don't make it in. Particularly, I understand it with the first six, but particularly with the sequels, there's so much like extra cool stuff about the sequels that could have easily been a 10-second throw in. Austin and I
Right.
have talked about it forever, but um, one
So
of
if he was
those,
on here right now, you guys could talk about that, right?
right? Send him the email. Uh, so oh my God, he sent me his email. All
I'll
right.
send them.
All right.
I'll invite
Here
him
we
to
go.
come on. You got it, or you want me to do it?
Here, I'm going to copy it and send it to you. Sorry,
Okay.
everybody. We're going to have a guest. All right. So, one of those on the topic of lightsabers, cool details is that, I know especially when we had Force Awakens come around, but then in particular, The Last Jedi, people were not in the broader space, like out in public, people were not too thrilled with Kylo Ren as a villain. They thought he was a bad villain, like he wasn't good at it, which is the point of the story. He's not good at it. He desperately wants to be it, and he just can't do it. Um, and one of those details is that the process of turning a lightsaber red is that you got to meditate with it and make it bleed and inflict so much suffering on this living rock that it bleeds and then it's just red. And when he does that, he like is trying so hard to do it that he does it, but the thing cracks. And then he has to put exhaust ports on his lightsaber because the blade's unstable. And it's like on fire and it's unstable and it's not really uniform, which I think is a cool, like that's better than it being purple, honestly, because he succeeded, but it has these, it's out of control, which is much how he acts. It
Yeah.
flares out the sides like a flame. You know, he had to. I think they're doing cool stuff with that. I haven't seen a whole lot about like, we just started seeing yellow ones. Even the Clone Wars just started seeing yellow ones. Nothing about it, like other than when we have to look it up. So maybe we'll get more of that. But
Yeah, yeah, you're right, and yeah, we don't really see too much of, or an explanation of really any of them.
mhm.
I'm guessing maybe in the books there probably is some, but in the movies there's nobody that really, again, nobody that really. I had to look that up because I
Yeah,
remember what it was, but they don't talk about that.
yeah,
The only thing, and even with Acolyte, we see how May or Osha turns that. Um,
mhm.
and some people had a problem with that, but I thought, man, if you, again, I just watched it again. If you watch that all the way through, you can see how she's had this anger
Yeah,
pent up in her for whatever 18, 20 years, however old she is. And when she finds out what the freak went on that night and how Saul killed her mother, she
yeah,
just turned and was like almost like Ahsoka. We're
yeah.
not turning, but figuring out, you know what, the Jedi are, this isn't the way I want to be. This isn't how the Jedi are supposed to be. So, yeah, I think at some point it would be cool to get some sort of explanation in there, because again, like you said with the yellow, now we see it as Ray,
Mhm.
and if I'm sure at some point we will get this movie. I know they sort of put it on hold, but I think we'll see her again with that yellow lightsaber, and there has to be some sort of explanation for that, I feel.
There's also, not to be that guy, but there's also real world explanations for all of them. Uh, before Return of the Jedi, they were all blue and red to designate good guys and bad guys. And then when they were doing the special effects for the Jabba's yacht scene, you couldn't see the blue against the sky when Luke was
Oh,
swinging.
okay.
So they changed it to green for the whole rest of the movie. So that's why we have greens. And then, like I said
That's
before,
cool.
we got a purple because Samuel L. Jackson said, "I want a purple one," and George Lucas is like,
Right.
"No, they're only blue or green." And then at the screening, he was surprised with a purple one. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's the real reason we have these. But
You ready? You ready?
I am ready. There
What's
he
up,
is.
Austin?
Hello.
Nothing a little bullying can't fix.
Yeah, just bullied right into it.
Yeah. Welcome. This is everybody. This is Austin Fuller. This is my best pal in the world.
Just trying
Thanks
to
for
figure out my
joining
iPad
us.
setup here.
That's
There
all
we
right.
Yeah.
Nice hat.
Go
There we
Wolves.
go. There we go.
Coming in from Minnesota.
Yep. Welcome. We've been wanting to have you for a long time.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see how long this lasts. My kid's watching his show before bath time. So
Okay.
we'll see how long I got.
Do you have anything to add to what you've been watching here?
The only thing I was gonna say, I like you talking about the Kylo Ren
Mm-hmm.
with the lightsaber. I also kind of always took that as I don't think he actually he suffered that much and he
Yeah.
tried to force it. It was a little, it's like the privileged boy that tries to be discriminated against, you know? So it's like he tried to put all this suffering into Crystal and it just was like, listen, dude, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're doing all right. So I think
Yeah.
that's always how I also viewed it as like why it didn't take, you know?
Yeah.
And I also, I know we talked about that a lot too. I always thought that was super cool. And I did not know that's where, I mean, thinking back when we were first watching Force Awakens was coming out, that's not where I thought that was going to go either.
Correct.
You know, obviously we had no idea that it was Ben Solo, but
Yeah. There's
Well,
Graham.
and I agree with you. I think you're right. I think with that, he is like that privileged. You know, you had Snoke come in here and bring him, you know, sort of push him to the dark side,
Yeah.
where he wasn't able to do that. You know, he didn't suffer like Austin said. He didn't suffer through it. He didn't, you know, he wasn't trained and tortured, you know, like Maul was, or even, you know, Palpatine when he was younger. So
Well,
that spoiled little brat kid, you know.
He also had to go on a bunch of murder sprees in order to try to get it. You know, like he had to go commit atrocities in order to, like, you know, provide himself with that darkness or whatever. And he hated it. He hated it every time.
do they touch on that in like the comics, like how long it took him to, you know, after the incident?
A little
How long
bit.
it
The
took
incident.
for him to like kind of
A little bit, but I think Jacob has a good point here. Like you said, the comics, you know, they're starting to come out with some stuff for the Knights of Ren. So
Mhm.
these comic, and you know, Jacob keeps giving me these comics, and I'm still reading. I'm along with watching the two shows. I'm still reading that Rebel Rising, which is really good. If you
Yeah.
haven't, and if you are which we all are, an Andor and a Rogue One fan, it's a great read. It really is, because it talks about her being with Saul and being in prison and different things like that. But again, to go back real quick, the comic books, now that they are canon, it's a cool. I think it's a better read because
Mhm.
now it's part of the universe, and obviously Jacob reads all of them along with Marvel and a bunch of other stuff too. But you know, these are the things that hopefully we can get some answers for in reference to that. In reference to your Kylo Ren that you were explaining how the lightsaber, where was that at? Was that in something, or was that
I want to say it was in the novelization.
okay? And that's the cool thing about the novelization too, that they
Yeah.
go into so much more depth with that.
like the initial, like the
I gotta step
failure of
away.
the bleeding.
Yeah. Like he
I'm pretty sure
cracked
that was
it.
in the novelization. Yeah, because I mean I remember that right away
Hey, bud.
Yeah.
when the movie
It was Force Awakens time.
yeah.
But also, speaking of, put it back up. Speaking of Jacob's comment, he's probably
Okay.
read it and can tell us where it comes from. But I think I sent both of you this. I screenshotted a little picture from one of the recent Kylo Ren Knights of Ren comics, where between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, he invades Naboo and declares himself king. because he can,
Okay,
and they
I appreciate
and they
it.
let him.
Uh,
And they let him. So yeah,
Is
pretty
this
much.
is this when Jar Jar was dancing for nickels or whatever by the?
Yeah, it might have been a little while after. Actually,
Yeah.
he might have been dead by then. Fun fact for everybody: the three of us met for the first time. Well, Austin and I have known each other a long time, but we all met. Austin and I met Ron at the same time at Star Wars Celebration in 2022. So,
yep.
little
Good
anniversary.
times.
Yeah, little anniversary here.
Good times.
Yep.
Absolutely.
That was 3 years ago. Can you guys believe that?
No, that's wild.
Yeah.
Oh, we got 27. We
Yeah.
gotta head off to.
Do it
It's
in
gonna be a good one.
Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark your
Yep. Here
calendar.
we go.
Tell your wife
This
she's
one
got to
was-
watch the kids.
Yeah. This is what I was referring to.
Okay.
Yeah. So Kylo Ren goes undercover and gets all the we'll have Jacob explain it on his episode. It's cool. Declares himself king of Naboo. So it's
Now,
cool.
is that a comic book? What he's talking about? I'm guessing too,
Yeah,
as well.
the
Yeah, and
latest
that's what we'll
issue
have
of
to
the.
do.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know he was finishing up the Darth Vader comics, which we really want to get him on here about and talk about that because there's so much information in the series for Vader, but also stuff like this,
Mhm.
were things that I didn't know that. I think that's cool. I think that would be a cool read to see him go undercover, on Naboo and do things like that. So, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm gonna have to start reading these comics
Yeah.
more.
Well, you guys, should we get into another of the listed topics? Again, everybody go to the top of the chat for the very beginning. We already got Gray Jedi ran out of the way. We went a little long on that one.
No, that's all right. So actually, Austin, why don't you pick? So we have Dave Filoni's Duel of the Fates interpretations versus Nick, or Balance of the Force, and the Chosen One prophet and the Chosen One prophecy.
I like the Duel of the Fates because I know the Filoni Duel of the Fates,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if I've heard if you have a new theory or concept about that one, Nick. I don't know if I've heard that, but I know we've talked about the Filoni interpretation.
Yeah, disclaimer is that we kind of intended for this to maybe be hot take territory or deep cut territory. Okay, so we're probably aware, but any viewers on the live right now, maybe go on sidebar to YouTube and look up Dave Filoni talking about Duel of the Fates. It's a little like director's roundtable, and he is talking about the Duel of the Fates, which is the epic fight scene between Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Darth Maul in the Phantom Menace. And he beautifully describes it. So let me say on the front end, I love what he said. So he beautifully describes it as literally the duel for the fate of Anakin Skywalker. That however this thing ends up is going to determine the fate of the kid. Because, if both Jedi survive and they kill them all, then all business as usual, bring him into the Jedi, maybe, whatever. Qui-Gon's around. If they both die, like the kid's just there, Anakin's just there, out in the lurch and all that stuff. But what he really gets into is that losing Qui-Gon puts Anakin under the care of Obi-Wan, which was not the right master for him in Dave Filoni's interpretation. I don't mean to paraphrase the video, go watch it. But essentially what he's saying is that Anakin needed a father figure, and Qui-Gon is that figure. And that he needed to survive and stick around for Anakin's fate to be like on the good side, basically. I think that's pretty beautiful. If you guys have anything, like your thoughts on his interpretation or anything to add that I missed, That's just the layman's argument for what he laid down. And it's beautiful. You should watch it. It kind of gives you like, makes you want to go watch Phantom Menace again.
Now, I want to hear your interpretation.
Yeah, I got some thoughts, but I want to hear what you say first. I want to know if you cover what I was going to ask you.
So I agree that I think it's one of those things that's like really cool to think about alternatives, and that's beautifully put. And I do think that's one also, you know, people talk about like George Lucas purposely putting things into Star Wars. Sometimes they're not on purpose. Sometimes it just happened and he uses it. I think he did put that in there like for a reason. I don't know, but it's beautiful. I just think if you actually think this through beyond, like, let's say Qui-Gon survives, I don't think that stops it Anakin's turn at all. I think Dave Filoni maybe is implying that Qui-Gon being around is best case scenario and it stops Darth Vader from existing. I don't. We've talked about that on the podcast before. Mad respect to Dave Filoni. I am not Dave Filoni. I totally get that. But I disagree. I feel like there are just as many variables, if not more, at play if Qui-Gon survives to turn Anakin than what we actually got. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Ron. I think it implies that like Anakin was totally screwed over by everybody, which he was screwed over, but there's a lot of agency and choice in this as well. And I think that it kind of diminishes Anakin's character and a lot of other parts of the story to think that that one change would stop it. It actually, I think, in some ways makes it harder for him not to turn if Qui-Gon survives. And I'm ready to bring those if you want. But what do you guys think of that so far?
I like that, but I think no matter what happens, Palpatine already has seen that Anakin's going to turn. So whether Qui-Gon brings it, lives or not, or he continues to, which I think he would have been a fantastic, master for Anakin. But again, everything was put into place by Palpatine to bring Obi-Wan in, which I don't think. I have a problem with you saying, and maybe you didn't say it, but I think Obi-Wan was a great master. I
do
think
too.
that
Yeah.
I think it's just Anakin. Anakin was, it didn't matter who was going to train him. It could have been Yoda. It could have been Mace. It could have been, anybody else. I think Anakin was, he had too much feelings, whether it was because he was older or because he was a slave or the way he felt about his mother. He's gonna go to the dark side either way because he feels so much passion for Padme. He will do obviously whatever it takes, kill little kids to save his wife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a couple different, like, I don't know if I'd say takes on it, but I think if I look at it narratively for like Star Wars, right? I think it is important to have a singular moment that changed the course of it all, right?
Yeah.
Like just narratively across the board, like I think it's important to be able to look back and say, where did it happen? And I think that's a good place to pick to say that's where it happened, right? And exactly because of what Filoni said, right? Whether or not maybe Qui-Gon would have been different, who knows if it would have changed. But I think what's the other side of that is also, if you believe that was the turning point, then I think you also have to believe to some extent that you kind of said it, Ron, that Palps knew what was going on too. He set it all up, right, to make that scenario happen. Which I think is another cool thing to think narratively, that he's that far behind everything and has it all figured out. Yeah, I mean, I do tend to agree with, with what Filoni said. I think I remember what I was commenting when you were talking about I just like to usually make comments to get you fired up. I don't even know if I gave my honest opinion when you were talking about it on whether or not, a different master would have changed Anakin. Because it's also kind of hard to believe that, or you don't want to believe that it was just inevitable no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. I think that, I guess depending on how you look at it, if it's inevitable that he goes to the dark side, then it's more difficult to believe there's still good in him.
I think it's
right. If it was just an inevitable turn, no matter what, then it's harder to believe that there was still something good.
I think a better way to say it, my mistake, better way to say it is that it's ultimately still going to come down to his choices. More than like I said it last when we had that, Dooku and Ahsoka comparison episode, that if you're dependent on other people making all the right choices for you, then you're just codependent on something rather than like exerting your freedom and your goodness. And I think if we're going to say that, if it would have been one different guy or like two different ways that you treated him would have been better. Well, like he was still had the choice. He still rose above it most of the time. Like he still made good choices. And when he was, I think you both nailed on the head. He's constantly being manipulated. And he's not being manipulated by the Jedi, even though they're just like mean to him and they're emotionally pretty devoid from him and brutal to him. But they're not like manipulating his soul. There's someone manipulating his soul since the day he meets him. And so I wrote down a list of reasons what complicates the Filoni Duel of the Fates thing. If I may, pull you guys over to my side a little bit.
You can try.
Here's some moving parts that still exist if Qui-Gon survives. The Jedi Council would still be blind to Darth Sidious. It's already happening. The Republic would still be crumbling under political corruption, if not already gone as it is by the time we get to Attack of the Clones. The Clone Wars would have still been being engineered. Like there would still have been a path to a galactic war that would push the Jedi into it or something, right? Dooku's still, and we know now through Tales of the Jedi, Dooku's still turned pretty much. He just hasn't left. Like what Tales of the Jedi provided us with is that he, Qui-Gon dying made me turn. He was already with Darth Sidious like that. You think Palpatine's gonna bring him to his lair if he doesn't think he's solid, of all people? Like, no, he's with him. Which is my, take on where Dooku's at. So he's still, that is maybe the bigger complication because he's going to leave or he's going to try to sway Qui-Gon and that's going to, be weird. And they might leave and that might make Anakin more susceptible because in a really weird way, Anakin might be safer as a young kid under a crumbling institution than he is out in the middle of nowhere with Qui-Gon and Dooku, Also, Palpatine, based on the Plagueis novel, I know it's not canon anymore, still doesn't like Qui-Gon at all. Thinks he's a problem. So, I think there would have been ways to find a way to get rid of him, and imagine now Anakin with the guy who found him dying instead of, like even, how mad Obi-Wan gets when, how mad Anakin gets when Obi-Wan's in trouble in the Clone Wars. Imagine if Qui-Gon trains him for 12 years and dies. What's he going to do then? He lost him at the only time he could lose him, really, in what we get. And then I wrote down Anakin's own personality. Still big time vulnerabilities and attachments that are being manipulated all the time. And to correct myself, it's more about it still comes down to his choice. And I do believe, especially what people in the chat are saying right here, Jacob, Qui-Gon is the best option for Anakin. But like, I don't know how Anakin would have done with that. I don't think it's a guarantee he would have been saved. And I think from Palpatine's point of view, that becomes Qui-Gon surviving becomes more of a complication than it is a preventative thing. And we've seen him dance around complications all the time. I think it complicates his schedule. I don't think he's going to sweat it though. And I have something to add to it, but I want to hear from you guys.
I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here.
Yeah.
Right. Because I wonder, and this is more of maybe just an interesting thought experiment about Star Wars as a whole, with like, I feel like they really like to touch on, like, there's like pure good versus pure evil, right? Mm-hmm. And how it's like, I don't know, it doesn't really exist. Like it's hard, right, to have, and that's where the balance comes in, the Gray Jedi conversation, which I don't agree with Gray Jedi existing anyways, but I feel like if you were to go down that path, like I think that's where Qui-Gon helps, is that Obi-Wan is about as pure of a Jedi as you can get, right? He follows the rules, he's by the book. And I think that opens up someone like Anakin to be more susceptible to the downside of it, right? Where like someone like a Qui-Gon who's a little bit more off the books, like do some stuff over on the side, whatever. Like,
well, and to your point, 1 sec, I'm going to add to your point. This is a great point. For the Gray Jedi thing, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, when they do bend the rules and aren't by the book, it's not like they're going out and committing bad acts. They just go like, oh, our bosses won't like this, but we're going to do this anyway because it's the right thing to do. They're not like they're not like expressing power over something. They're just, Qui-Gon's moving the dice so he knows he wins so that he can save Anakin. Like, it's not a big deal. Or Obi-Wan like looks the other way when he knows Anakin's like with Padme. He's like, okay, hey, Graham, what's up? Graham Fuller, everybody.
You want to say hi real quick?
Hey, buddy, what's up?
That's about my cue.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah.
But no, I think that's just an interesting way to think about it, is like, is having someone that's too good the downfall to Anakin, right? Mm-hmm. Like, instead of someone that's a little bit more lax on things, would he have been able to adapt and take the hits a little bit better, right? Mm-hmm. Because he wasn't trying to be some perfect Jedi and then get knocked down a peg. He would have a little bit more understanding of things as a whole. So like when Mace Windu's a little bit of a butthole to him, he's like, whatever, mm-hmm. I'll be fine. It doesn't take it so hard. Just an interesting way to think about it, I think.
Well, also like Obi-Wan's disadvantage there is that in a way you can tell he's like really overprotective because he just watched his master die in front of him. So he doesn't want to. Hey, Graham. But yeah, he's watched the person closest to him die in front of him, and he's not going to make that happen again. He wants to make sure Anakin is careful, and he owes it to his master to do it. I have another wrinkle in this, and I don't know. I think Dave Filoni was just painting a really pretty picture that we all really like. So I'm just going to keep taking it steps further and be mean about it. I think
real quick. I'm gonna drop and get some bath time ago.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Austin Fuller, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Say bye, Graham.
Bye, Graham.
Bye.
See you, buddy. Graham's awesome. So here's another wrinkle, Ron. What if Obi-Wan would have died instead of Qui-Gon?
See, I still go back to, I think that Anakin's turning either way. I think Qui-Gon would have been a great master, but also now you have, if Qui-Gon is his master, he's already, again, he's with the living force, but he's bending the rules a little bit like Anakin does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you have that going on, he might have fallen sooner,
Yeah.
or something like that. Which I think Jacob makes a good point, but I also think it's funny because I think it refers to a Marvel Civil War as well.
Yeah.
But again, if you bring Anakin and Qui-Gon and Dooku in to go against the Jedi before Dooku actually goes to the dark side, because I think you still have to have the rule of two.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't you have to have, like Jacob said, the Civil War in it, because it can't be Sith and Jedi, because we already have that.
Yeah.
So the infighting, I think there is a little bit of that already. We even see that in the Acolyte,
Mm-hmm.
and we see, like you talked about at the beginning, we see a little bit of the stuff where Mace Windu says, "Hey, you know what? We can't see what's going on. We need to let somebody know." And Yoda's like, "No, not yet. We need to, this is good. This is going to happen." So I feel that either way, Anakin's going.
Yeah, I do too.
Whether it's Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan, I think Anakin. It's interesting to see. I don't know how Anakin would have taken it, because at that point, what does Qui-Gon do if Obi-Wan dies?
That's my reason for the question. I think it makes it even.
Does he turn to that yellow, more of that gray Jedi, not yellow, that gray Jedi, or is he just like, you know what, middle finger to everybody, I'm done with this.
Mm-hmm. So what I wrote was, he might have, as Obi-Wan did, developed a protective attachment over Anakin because he lost a Padawan, which Anakin already has attachment issues. So I don't know if put two of them together is. Yeah, I think Qui-Gon might have rose above it, but I think it would have rattled him because he's a feeling person. Like, that's one of his strengths, is that he feels his humanity quite a bit, the living, the moment, that sort of thing.
Right.
I think he becomes probably more defiant in general, and maybe not in a good way this time. I think he would. I just wrote grief, so I think he would experience grief at a time where Anakin needs someone stable, like Dave Filoni's saying, like Qui-Gon is stable. And I think this is what I can't believe Austin's reading my mind. I think that grief is going to push them more into the arms of like Yoda or something like that,
Okay.
I think he's going to lean into something good and not necessarily like lose his mind and turn to the dark side or anyway, but I just think he would not, the Qui-Gon we know would not be the Qui-Gon we would get in Anakin's most formative years as a Jedi Padawan. I think he would be changed for at least for a little bit, and he'd have to get over it, because one of the cooler things about him is he's a thinking, feeling human person. And the Jedi at that point kind of like repressed that stuff, or tried to train you to repress it. And I think this is the next part. I already said it before, but if then Qui-Gon was killed later on, like, that's a much harsher wound to Anakin than when he did die.
Oh yeah.
I think that sends Anakin, that makes Anakin so much more vulnerable than he already was. I think it really guts him emotionally. And then obviously makes him kind of a sitting duck in a way. The fact that Obi-Wan and Padme, and then, obviously we now know Ahsoka, stood between Palpatine and Anakin for so long is actually really impressive. And I just think if Qui-Gon's the one doing that, and if he goes down because, Palpatine needs him out, if that's the case, then that makes, I think, Anakin's emotional reaction even sharper. And then I'm going to be honest with you, Ron, I don't know if, like Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon would have been cool about Padme.
True.
I don't know if he would. I don't think him being of the living force means I'm going to let you, fool around with the, older senator lady.
Right.
Like, that's not your place. Like, you have to be in here now. Like, you have a responsibility. I think Obi-Wan, as we see in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, sees how much pain Anakin's in better than anybody and says he needs this. That was probably the coolest thing he did for him, other than, like, love him and be a mentor to him. But and then I wrote down also, Qui-Gon seems to be the only guy in the building who's interested in prophecies, which can lead into the other topic. But prophecies are not necessarily a good thing for Jedi, because their core principle that your man Yoda says in Empire Strikes Back is the future's always in motion. Can't get too tied up in it. When you start attaching yourself to prophecies, you lose the plot real big. Look at Cypher Diaz, he's gone. So it makes them go crazy, and you try to control events rather than being at balance with it. And I think Qui-Gon was kind of into it. I think if Qui-Gon kept pressing the issue about the Chosen One prophecy to Anakin, that either puts a lot of pressure on Anakin or makes him more entitled. But to be fair, like Jacob said, I think the only person equipped to do that is Qui-Gon. So I don't know. I think Obi-Wan did a better job than people give him credit. He's dealt a tough hand. He was not ready to take anybody, but and he did
absolutely. I think
he did the defiant Qui-Gon Jinn thing by telling Yoda, whether he does it here or he does it with me somewhere else, I'm training him. And that's what Qui-Gon would have done. And I think Obi-Wan, we say that he, like, even though he's scolding him, Obi-Wan does let him, especially in the Clone Wars, lets him kind of do his thing. And he just,
and that's what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, he's always there to tell him, like, hey, what the hell are you doing? This is why that was a bad idea. But he just goes like, oh, what are you going to do? Kid's out loose again.
Right.
And I think he did the best he could. It was still up to Anakin's choices. He just needed to, get over his resentment and entitlement a little bit, which they should have been a resource for. And Qui-Gon would have been a resource for that. But I also think Qui-Gon, especially with Obi-Wan, he was stern about it. Like, Obi-Wan, first line of the movie, senses Darth Sidious. Go watch it. He says, I sense something. It's elsewhere and it's elusive. And Qui-Gon says, shut the hell up. Like, focus. We got a job to do. Live here and now. Live in the moment. And he's like, okay. And that's like Obi-Wan to a T. Like, yep, I will. I'll forget all about it. I think Qui-Gon would have done that to Anakin all the time. But, maybe his attachment to Qui-Gon would have been bigger and stronger. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then what do you do? Yeah, go ahead.
There's a comment over on Instagram. Andy McKillop. It seems like Qui-Gon's death made Kenobi a more stern teacher, whereas Qui-Gon seemed more at peace in the moment. I think that's very true.
I think that's true. I think Qui-Gon demonstrates in the Phantom Menace an ability to get pretty stern when he needs to. And I think he would have been tested. I mean, what would he would have done with the Clone War? Like, what would Qui-Gon have? I don't think he would have fought in it, to be honest with you. Or maybe, I don't know. And, assuming they didn't go after him beforehand when Dooku's leaving, it just leaves a lot of question marks around, and to go back to if Qui-Gon died, like, who's there to be his father figure if Qui-Gon dies? You know who. Palpatine.
Right.
Who's there with open arms to, welcome him in. Now, I will say, I think Qui-Gon would not have let him around there, because Qui-Gon was very much not into politics at all. Neither was Obi-Wan. Neither was Obi-Wan, but he let him kind of explore and have his freedom. I think Qui-Gon would have shielded them off from that life. The complication is, like, how would he have done that if Dooku's around? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what Jacob said. He puts in there that that's what Qui-Gon's biggest hangback is, or whatever you want to call it, that it was the politics of this whole thing. And I think you're right. You know?
Right there. Yeah. How would he have handled all of that, and how does that not make Anakin more vulnerable? I
Right.
don't know. I forgot what I was going to say, but I just think, to your point earlier, Palpatine just adapts and pivots. He does not have this whole thing written out beat by beat. He's got the big picture and he adapts, and he's always 5 steps ahead and knows how he can adapt. He's got contingencies on contingencies. So I feel like Qui-Gon complicates that, but he's already in a pretty great spot with Dooku. And he'd be in a pretty good spot if Obi-Wan is the guy who's killed. He's my favorite character. I would be really sad if that was the alternative, but obviously it isn't. Ultimately, we're just dealing in what ifs now. So,
Yeah.
Well,
but there's a couple. Isn't there a couple novels with Qui-Gon in them?
Mm-hmm. Master and Apprentice is a really good one.
Yeah.
And he was a tough master on Obi-Wan, and they didn't mesh right away. And I still am not super clear on the actual logic of this, but at the end of that book, spoiler alert to everybody, basically Obi-Wan gets placed with Qui-Gon as a Padawan. Qui-Gon's had a Padawan before, and it was kind of a failure. I think maybe the Padawan died or something. And I don't remember exactly. Qui-Gon doesn't want one, I don't think. And then Obi-Wan has been through several masters up to that point, and he's extremely defiant. He's just like Qui-Gon, extremely defiant, and it's because he busted his ass and worked so hard because he didn't have a huge force aptitude, and he's not he's very sure of the work he's put in, all that kind of stuff. Very defiant of masters. So Yoda places him with Qui-Gon so that Obi-Wan would defy Qui-Gon by being a better Jedi. If that makes sense. I don't see the logic in that. I feel like they would be more kindred spirits, like we kind of think of them as. But Obi-Wan's ultimate defying move to Qui-Gon to have tension was to be more like Yoda and be more like the Jedi Council. And then Qui-Gon dies and Obi-Wan kind of sticks with it. I think there are several moments. I also think Obi-Wan, if we're talking this whole Qui-Gon surviving thing, I think Obi-Wan's right in Attack of the Clones when he tells Dooku that Qui-Gon would never join you. I think Qui-Gon would pick up that there's more going on with Dooku than just political stuff. I think he'd be able to read the room a little bit better. There it is. Yep. I think he'd be able to read the room a little bit better.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just going to step back just a little bit, and then we'll go back into that. But I have not read this, and I think just the things that you've mentioned on this podcast right now makes me want to go read this one as well, to talk and see a little bit more of Obi-Wan's history and Qui-Gon's history and how they came together. So I think that's pretty cool. If you haven't, if nobody's read that yet, if what Nick just said doesn't get you psyched about reading that book, it should. I think that would be. I think that's going to be a good read. So sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, in that book, there's also an origin story of why Obi-Wan's not a fan of flying.
Oh, okay.
It's interesting. I won't spoil it. It's a fun little thing, but.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really convoluted way to say I really like Dave Filoni's interpretation. I think it's beautiful. I think it's generally correct. I just think if you think it out in the possibilities of what's going on, that ultimately it still does come down to Anakin's choices, although he was failed in many ways by a lot of people. And I think even with Qui-Gon, it would have been up to Anakin's choices. I don't think Qui-Gon would have let him be codependent on him the way that everyone else kind of let him be. And I think that could result in the same thing because he's still being manipulated, and there's still a war
Yeah.
being manufactured. There's still, corruption and rotting of the very institutions they're in. So it's just one of those thoughts. I just remember, in fact, like texting Austin about when that video came out and being like, that's really cool. But the more I think about it, I don't think so. And here we are. So
Yeah.
that was
Well, and
years
to go
ago.
back, yeah. Oh yeah. To go back to what you were talking about before I interrupted you, when Dooku was talking to Obi-Wan about Qui-Gon, switching over, and I'm sure they probably did have good conversations about that, and I think Qui-Gon probably agreed with some of those things, but I agree with you and Obi-Wan saying that he's not going to switch over. But again, I think also, if something like you said before, if Obi-Wan dies and it's the roles are reversed and Qui-Gon's, if that exact thing happens and it's reversed where Qui-Gon sees, Maul do that to his apprentice like that, I don't think he would have gone to the dark side, but I think some of the dark side would have come out in him, almost like that Mace Windu video of that they don't show in the Clone Wars of
Yeah.
how he actually takes Boba Fett out or Jango Fett out. I
Yeah.
think if Qui-Gon, when that shield comes down and Obi-Wan's laying there dead, and Maul's still there, I think he would have probably chopped Maul more than just in half.
Yeah. And you never know, like, these are all big what ifs. This is not me saying screw Dave Filoni. It's the opposite. I think it was a great idea to keep thinking through. Austin made the best point, is that from a narrative perspective, it is a linchpin in the story of, like, this is where things kind of deviate. There's a lot of those in Star Wars, but I think that, yeah, here we go. That's a good point. There it is. Yeah, I think Qui-Gon relates to the first topic. Qui-Gon is as much of a gray Jedi as anyone's ever wanted to see, and that is actually how the Jedi are supposed to be. I like to believe, just as a narrative point, that that's why Qui-Gon was able to achieve immortality. I think that's why Obi-Wan and Yoda had to go into exile, actually. I know it was to watch the kids, but I think Qui-Gon ultimately had this understanding of, like, the loss of the ego and letting go of it, letting go of, like, the self, in a way of, like, serving the living force, and then he became the living force. It's not like he powered up or anything. He reached, like, a new spiritual level that's above, that is the force. It's not like, and to the point where they can't or either don't care to, like, intervene. They're like, yeah, we'll show
Right.
up. We'll show up when you can handle it. And I always like to think that that's kind of why, obviously, Yoda and Obi-Wan had to train, as they say in Revenge of the Sith, to be able to talk to him. But I think that's part of it. Like, you got to go into exile and shed all of the bullshit, and you need to, lose the self and get with the bigger picture. And that's something that I don't know. Like, could Qui-Gon have done that without dying? Probably. But I think there's
Yeah.
this whole, like, will of the force thing at play, where, like, in that moment he was at one with everything. He's like, I care about this kid. That is not a bad thing. And I believe that he's a chosen one, not because I'm a prophecy freak, but because I feel it. And I'm connected to the source of this better than them. And he dies, and he knows, like, he's putting his faith in it, and then bam, becomes a living force. I don't know how it actually works. I've never done it before, but so enough about that. What else do we got? Anyone want to talk about that some more, or any of it? Because we got one more topic of mine left. If anyone wants a different topic, pop it in. Again, we're just talking, anyone who's just joining us, we're talking deep dives and some theories and lores. Like, kind of just diving into random Star Wars stuff. So if you have any,
Yeah, I like that. I like that last one that you have there in reference to the balance of the Force and the Chosen One prophecy. I think that would be um, something you could touch on. I'm gonna have to get off here in a minute, but something you can touch on. But that could be a whole. I'd love to get Derek and Mike's take on that as well,
of the
for the
balance,
Chosen One prophecy. You
yeah,
know, because I think it can go several ways. Again, it's a certain point of view.
yeah,
You know where we think of these things and what's going to go on with that. So I think it's interesting, and I think that would be something cool to talk about as well.
before you leave, you got to answer Jacob's question because I think I know what you would have said, but we already got it. What species of Jedi are y'all wanting to see next? Ewok, Jawa, etc. I know yours and everybody's answer prior to last June.
For what?
This question,
To
Jacob.
who would be who would you want to see?
Yeah.
Um, man, I really and I know I forget his name, but I know he's already out there. Is the Tusken Raider?
Oh
Yes,
yeah, yeah.
awesome. But there is one out there already.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, and he
Jar
has.
Patal, or no, that's what was his name? I don't
Your
remember.
pal Joe, what's going on, buddy? Thanks for joining us.
I know that prior to the acolyte, you'd have said Wookiee, and then we got it. Or would you have?
Yeah, but we had
Oh, we had the
what's
kid
the little
from
from Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Not Ganji. I forget what his name is, but yeah, the Tusken Raider I think is fantastic, and I don't know if it's a comic or what it is,
It's a big
but
legend
they're
story. He eventually
okay.
becomes this big time Sith Lord later on. Because Obi-Wan punks him. And yeah, we got one of them, I think.
Yeah, and I think Joe's
Yeah,
right as well.
yep.
Oh, he had
Obi-Wan
oh
punks
yeah.
him in the desert, and then he, renounces his whole thing and then comes back later as if anyone can put in what his name becomes or what his name was, this Tusken Raider guy. But he kind of comes up on Obi-Wan in the desert, and Obi-Wan's like, no, son. Actually, just like Maul does in Rebels. But yeah, here we go. Boss Nass is a Jedi. Yep. This is Jacob. Are you referring to the Rhodian? Yep. So I think I'm going to go on to the third topic. Sherrod Het. Thank you, your pal
Yep.
Joe. That's him. That's him.
Yep.
Doesn't he become a very, very important Sith Lord in the expanded universe later on? Like way later on?
Oh, really? He turns into a
Yeah.
Sith? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
like a long time after, like I think in the era of Luke and Leia's kids in the legends and stuff.
Okay.
But I might have the wrong
That's
person because I know one of their kids becomes one too. But
yeah.
it's a lot of them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely cool. I'm gonna let you take it from here. You got your pal Joe Jacobs on here, Austin's on
Mhm.
here. You guys give Nick some good feedback. We will be on next week again. Nick will let you know that.
Mhm.
And then just real quick, we do have somebody lined up for next week for an interview. So we will be having a new special guest podcast out, which will be an interview with this special guest. And I'm not going to say too much more about it. We have mentioned it before in the podcast, but they will be getting with them on I think it's Tuesday next week, and as soon as that's done, I'm gonna edit it and get it out as soon as possible. So look for ads for that, and look for ads for what we're going to be doing next couple weeks in reference to Star Wars Jedi Chat on Wednesdays. So Nick's going to be taking it over the next couple of times. Mike and Derek should be back next week as well. So we'll have all that, and y'all have a good time. Sorry I can't stay on, but Nick, you're killing it, and may the force be with y'all.
May the force be with you, Ron. Thanks.
Hey, buddy.
See ya. And then it was one. Yeah, so your pal Joe is here. Jacob is here. Let's see, Austin's still here. We got 6 people, but unfortunately I can't see all of you on the screen. So we have 2 topics down. We went with Dave Filoni's interpretation of Duel of the Fates, which in summary I think is great. I'm not out here, I'm not a hater. I really love Dave Filoni and his work. I just remember when that came out, it blew everybody's minds, and right away, it's like a mind blower for sure. I agree with that. And I just kept thinking about it and thinking, like, I actually think it makes Anakin's journey more complicated for Qui-Gon to survive, despite the fact that he's the best guy for the job. Much in the same way that, on the opposite end of the spectrum, Darth Plagueis might have been the best guy for the job as Emperor of the Universe. But it couldn't be him, So I don't know. I think it's up to Anakin's own choices in the end, although Qui-Gon would be the best man to help him with that. I don't know. I think there's still a lot at play. Maybe Qui-Gon being alive actually complicates all of the stuff. The second one we talked about, I guess it was the first one, was my Gray Jedi rant. Any comments you guys have on any of these, throw them out. My rant was, I'm not a big Gray Jedi guy. I think it's just sort of like a lack of consequences for characters' actions. But I do think if you're going to take the definition that we all claim to have for Gray Jedi, I think that's just actually what Jedi are supposed to be. I think, Qui-Gon Jinn, when people say he's a Gray Jedi, like that's the way Jedi are supposed to be. And we're just viewing the prequel era Jedi and kind of everything that's left over as, that's a flawed institution at that point. Mace Windu's kind of the linchpin. Jacob pointed that out. He's a weird one because he can dip in and out, but I think he's unique in that sense where he can accomplish that. But we watch guys like Quinlan Voss, obviously Anakin, all kinds of people. Once you get in there, it's almost impossible to get out. And that's why we have such huge stories about it in Star Wars, like Revan and Quinlan and Anakin, because it's not usually possible to get out of it. So anyway, we have one topic left, and that is this one, Balance of the Force, Chosen One prophecy. If you in the chat would like to get in on this, get in on here now. Obviously, with Balance of the Force, we're talking about a pretty huge component of what happens in the prequels, right? Everything's kind of predicated on, this prophecy, all this kind of stuff. I have hold on. We'll go back to this. Thanks, Jacob. If that's in that rant video, then I bet he did touch on it, I think Freddie Prinze Jr.'s rant is really funny and really powerful. It's kind of like simplifies this all down. I'm actually in the next topic, the Balance of the Force topic, I'm actually against Freddie Prinze Jr. about it. And I know he learned from Dave Filoni and all that, but Ron said it himself. This is hot take time. I get the mic and I get to spew my opinions at you guys, and you guys can, destroy me for it, please. But I think the Balance of the Force thing is something we all get Wrong. And I'm sorry, Dad. This comment here, I disagree. I think Anakin does bring balance, but this is one of the things that gets, I think, lost in translation. So I'm going to keep putting your comments up here, but we're now on this guy right here. Balance of the Force, Chosen One prophecy. Let's just start with what occurs in the film. So this kid comes along and Qui-Gon believes he's the chosen one, which is, the person, the prophecy literally reads a chosen one born of the Force will destroy the Sith and bring balance, something like that. And throughout the entire prequel trilogy, they're predicated on it being him. Anakin's an immaculate conception, which is kind of like the born of the Force thing. So he's kind of like, a deity of sorts. And they're very heavy-handed on talking about him destroying the Sith, and that's what's going to bring balance. Obviously, it doesn't go that way for them. They all get slaughtered by him and by the decisions he makes. And the Force is in the darkest place it's been in a long time. And so what George Lucas would say is that he eventually brings balance when he kills the Emperor for his son and destroys the Sith, and now we have balance. And then I know in the sequels we kind of get hairy about what balance is and what's at stake there, but that's kind of like what you get from the films, just in a very broad and not well described way. What people I think sometimes take from that is a numbers game, and that's what I'm talking about, Jacob, when we're talking about this Freddie Prinze Jr. talking about balance in the Force. I'm not a big fan of the numbers game. I think that's kind of outside of the point. I'll get to the numbers game later, but essentially what it comes out to is people saying, well, Anakin, on screen killed all the Jedi. They killed all the Jedi, and there's him and the Emperor on one side and Obi-Wan and Yoda on the other. It's balanced. That's kind of the take. And I remember that kind of becoming a meme. And that's, I think, what my dad was getting to here. He's talking about bringing about balance in a different way. Sure, that's balance, 2 versus 2. We now know that there are a lot of Jedi left over. We now know that the Force wasn't balanced. We kind of knew already the Force wasn't balanced because everything was bad, and what I kind of subscribe to the idea of balance, as George Lucas has put it, and how it's been written in some of the ways, that it has nothing to do really with who's in play. It's not a numbers game. It's a state of their reality. It's a state of the Force. The Jedi, despite their flaws later on, are correct, and their philosophy is right. That's just my opinion. But at their best, the Jedi believe that they are meant to be stewards of the Force. They have these abilities. They've created this discipline and this training to not manipulate the Force for themselves, but to be stewards of it. That the light of the Force is what gives life to everything. It's the life-giving literal force of all existence. And that in order for it to continue to give life and to be in balance, you have to just flow with it. The Force is will, much like Qui-Gon is into. The will of the Force is more important than anything. At their best, the Jedi are accepting of the existence of the dark side. That's just part of it. It's not binary. It's not light versus dark. They know the dark side's there. Everybody's going to struggle with it at some point. They know things are going to happen. And that they're meant to just be with it and understand it and communicate with it. And then one of the best ways that they kind of came to discipline with it is to protect it and to protect people, to protect peace, freedom, life, to be guardians of it, be stewards of it. The Sith, on the other hand, recognize that the dark side can give you a lot of things that you want right now. And the Sith, over thousands of years, not just used the dark side, but they abused it more than anybody ever. The abilities that they came to hone in on for thousands of years really, really are a toxic part of the Force. That's how I've interpreted it. Hate to say it, that's how George Lucas put it. And they are like a poisonous, cancerous part of the Force because they have abused and manipulated and kind of distorted the dark side in order to corrupt it and bend the Force to their will. So the Jedi flow with it. They want to communicate, exist in harmony with the Force, be stewards to it. The Sith believe that because of our abilities, we bend the universe to our will. We bend the Force to our will. And they're willing to basically put a chokehold on the flow of the Force in order to do that through their specific practices of abusing the dark side. It's also kind of like a drug for them. So in that way, I think you can literally take that prophecy, so to speak, as literal as you want, because I would say that, the Sith kind of have, as we know, an unnatural effect on the Force, an unnatural presence and ability on the dark side, and it disrupts that balance and harmony. Kind of poisons the lake, or puts a choke on the lake. And I think the Jedi realized that at some point in their history, and believe that destroying the Sith will bring balance, and lo and behold, turns out they're right. This is why I don't agree with the Freddie Prince. I'm not talking about you specifically, Jacob. I'm talking about the numbers game here. And I know there's a lot of people who like the numbers game. I'm not here to tell you you're wrong. I just want to explain where I'm coming from. If I did a scan and I found out that half of the cells in my body were perfectly healthy, and then exactly the other half of the cells in my body were cancerous, would that be balance? Sorry, that's Chewy. Again, if half of the cells in my body were perfectly healthy and exactly the other half were cancerous, am I at balance? Am I balanced in my existence in my life? No, I'm incredibly cancerous in that scenario, and imbalanced. So I think you can view the hold that the Jedi and the Sith have on the Force as a similar thing. As long as the Sith continue to unnaturally manipulate the Force, there can't be balance. And I think that's what that prophecy is getting at. What Anakin does do is, I believe, brings balance to the Force himself, literally, by throwing Palpatine down the shaft and destroying him for the first time. But I also think Luke has a hand in that too. I think Luke's existence there and Leia's existence elsewhere is kind of the catalyst and is sort of helping him do it. And, we see in The Last Jedi, like Luke say, for a while there was balance and then things got weird. Let me know what you guys think in the comments of that, because I'm going to keep going. But I think it's important to talk about this numbers game in reverse. So I just did the cancerous cells thing. Half my body's polluted with cancer and exactly the other half is healthy. I'm not at balance. I'm technically balanced, but that's a bad recipe right there. So let's do the numbers game, but in reverse, because that's what I actually think it is. So if people are out here talking about, Well, Anakin got it down to 2 Sith and 2 Jedi. It's balanced. Flip that the other way around, and that actually is the situation. There is one Sith Lord that's the master of the whole thing, that's consistent through the whole thing. That's Darth Sidious, if you're going from like the end of the Phantom Menace up to Revenge of the Sith. There's one Sith Lord who takes on 3 apprentices. This one guy has so much control and domination over the Force that he's blinded 10,000 very powerful Jedi. He's blinded an entire galaxy. He's polluted the entire galaxy with war. He has complete control over galactic events. He has complete control on the Jedi being able to actually serve the Republic and to actually do the things that they always do. They can't see him at all, and that's their whole thing. One person holds all that power. That is the imbalance. That it's the other way around. It's not that, there's 10,000 Jedi and there's 2 Sith. It's imbalanced because there's 10,000 over here and it's too many. It's the other way. Is that the entire sway of galactic events and of the Force belongs to one guy, because he himself has attained it by essentially just ripping a wound into the Force and abusing it, trying to pull as much unnatural power out of it as possible, trying to bend everything to his will, and he's successful at it. And that's what makes me believe that destroying the Sith would actually bring balance, that you could maybe take the prophecy literally. Now here's the other question. Was the prophecy even real? I don't know. Doesn't have to be. Here's Mr. Calc Major over here. I don't know what that means, so I have to come back on and explain it. But is the prophecy even real? Have we ever wondered that? Like, if you watch, I recommend doing this. Maybe go back and watch some of the prequels with the idea that the prophecy isn't even real. That's superstition. Has no effect. It's just something somebody said one time that has carried through. When you watch it with that perspective, this whole thing is so, like, it kind of hits a little different. It shows like exactly where it kind of paints Qui-Gon in a tough light, which I don't like. But can you imagine if that prophecy isn't real, and the entire Jedi Order decides, you know what, we're going to go with it, despite having reservations about it before. And, I just think that's a really fascinating thing. I'm curious to hear what the chat has to say about that, because I think that puts a much more real world kind of spin to this big tragedy, that it might not be anything that we know. Yoda says maybe we misread the prophecy. In what way could you misread that prophecy? Does that mean that it's actually Luke and Leia? Does that mean that it's actually Rey? Does that mean that it, what we were right about balance or wrong? Who knows? But I think it's an interesting point to think that this whole thing might not be real at all. Despite that, in closing to that point, I'll pull it up again. To this point here, I don't think the Force cares that the Jedi and the Sith exist. I don't think it cares at all. I think it does care when it's being affected. So I think it cares, like, if it's a living entity, it cares that the Jedi are caring for it, and it cares that the Sith are abusing it and poisoning it. At the end of the day, the Force is going to persist with or without the Jedi, and it's going to seek balance with or without the Jedi. And I think the Jedi at their best know that and make it a lot bigger than themselves or their abilities. So, yeah, if there's anything you guys want to hear with that, I think Austin might be coming back on here in a little bit. But I just think sometimes we get in the weeds of like what we see on screen, and that all the events were prophesized, and the prophecy might not have even been real. The prophecy might have been misread. My dad, if my dad's still in the chat, my dad said to me in 2005 that I think while we were watching the movie, yeah, I think the prophecy is actually about Luke, which could be. I don't know. They don't know. I think what we end up seeing, and like the George Lucas way of putting it, is that Anakin does actually fulfill the prophecy, and then that's done, right? And then I think a good way to look at the future is that people are mad about Rey, being involved in like the Force going out of balance again. But I think what Rey and Ben Solo did was prevent, the return of the Sith. So Anakin destroyed the Sith, and then Anakin's grandson and Palpatine's granddaughter prevent the return of the Sith. And in that way, it's probably effectively over. We don't know. If Mike were here, he would probably have all of the upcoming schedules for what we're about to see. But yeah, I don't know. I think balance persists no matter what. I think the Jedi have the right idea. I think the Sith act as a unnatural, unhealthy kind of vice grip on the Force to choke it out a little bit. And the Jedi know that that's just causes more destruction and suffering and is not the way things should be. Yet they understand, like much like a storm, like the Jedi know the nature is beautiful and it's nature. We are all living things, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be hurricanes and tornadoes and fires and all that stuff. The dark side still exists, but it's a part of it. And instead of leaning into burning everything to the ground, digging everything up, damming off rivers that, all kinds of stuff, instead of doing all that and manipulating the whole thing to yourself, just be at peace with it, be harmonious with it, understand it, understand the dark side is going to be there, but reject using it, rise above it. And, they have thousands of years of a whole training course for you to learn how to do it. And I think the irony is they end up actually becoming immortal in the end, and the Sith don't, so that's where I'm at. And if anybody has comments, again, we're Star Wars Jedi Chat, we're probably close to being done pretty soon. Austin, I think, is going to come back and give some of his thoughts at some point. Look at that, 6 minutes from now. We were doing hot takes. I gave a few of my, I would say, warm takes on stuff. And we just wanted to deep dive into things. And I felt like, since I'm doing it solo, Ron's working, Derek's moving, and Mike's on vacation, I figured we'd get interactive with it and do sort of like bounce ideas off each other. And so for those who have just joined, we talked about Dave Filoni's Duel of the Fates interpretation, which is really cool. Check it out on YouTube. And then what I think of it. And go through the chat. That had a lot of great ideas in there. We talked about Grey Jedi and what we think of them. We talked about the balance of the Force and Chosen One prophecy. This I could go hours on. I feel like I really diluted what I really feel about it. And this would be a good one to have Ron and Derek and Mike on. So maybe you guys got a sneak peek of it today, because I know they'll want to talk about it. I'm sure we'll talk about it in a couple of weeks here with them. Because this is kind of a big deal. It's what the whole thing, you didn't know it during the original trilogy, but this is kind of what the whole thing's built on. It's what both philosophies of the two main factions are. And to the point of this topic, I think we had a comment back here about, here we go. So Austin, who will be joining us in a sec, writes, I think in general, the concept of the Jedi is interesting. Boiled down, it's just a church of the religion of the Force. Analogy to real life. Qui-Gon maybe doesn't align with the church. Well said. I think we all kind of feel that at times, right? I think Qui-Gon still believes in what the Jedi are supposed to be, on what it is, of what the Force is. But he doesn't like where the institution is headed. He's not really into it. I think that plays into the balance of the Force. I think the Jedi themselves kind of helped the Force not be in balance by kind of like becoming assholes, if I'm allowed to say that. I think they became really out of touch with just, being a conscious person. I think they became really brutally walled off from like real human. I know we're dealing with humans and non-humans, but like human interaction and emotion. And in some of these books that are coming out now, they really illustrate that they were pretty arrogant in terms of like their ability to be around forever and their ability to like keep things together. And that's not necessary. That's kind of going the other way on balance. Like they tried to control the situation. They tried to say, oh, things are getting weird. We can handle it. And they just like grab onto this thing they think still exists, which is a republic and all that kind of stuff. And based on a definition I just gave a little bit ago about balance, that's going completely the other way. That's trying to control, kind of unnaturally trying to control events. As we've said before in the podcast, I think by fighting in the war at all, they kind of lost it, which is a word for word line from the Revenge of the Sith novel. They, by receiving this military and being like, well, if there's going to be a war, we're going to lead it. That's it. That's the nail in their coffin before it ever happened. Because I think that throws off the balance just as much as, the Sith are throwing it out of balance. So again, leave a little comment if you have any thoughts about balance of the Force or the Chosen One prophecy. I'm going to put it up here again, just so everyone knows what we're talking about. I'm not up here saying that this is exactly how it has to be or how it is. It's how I see it. I think there's enough context clues in there and enough outside of universe explanations and, philosophies from the novels and stuff that give it to you a lot. And I don't think it's a numbers game. I don't think it's like there's any kind of like contrarian argument over like what balance means. I think if anything, I'm going to go with my reverse numbers game where, 10,000 Jedi are outnumbered by one guy. I think that's more representative of the point I'm trying to make rather than, equal numbers people. Because it's not, how do you even, what if the two Sith that are there, or let's say, what if the two Jedi that are left don't know anything and aren't very good at it? Like, if it's two weak Jedi against two strong Sith, is that balance? Like, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it's about numbers. I think it's about who's currying favor with the Force. And with that, Jacob, I do agree with Freddie Prinze Jr. Go look at his thing on YouTube too. He has a rant that's really funny and very, I think, pretty accurate about, kind of the discourse that was happening like 10 years ago about Star Wars. I do agree that the Force reacts in ways to kind of always seek balance for itself. The difference with what we have in, say, the prequels is that the more powerful the Sith get, the more unnatural they can manipulate space and time and everything, the more of a boot on the neck of the Force it is. And they can't really rebalance that, as well. The Force can't rebalance itself always. So I think an active Sith presence, especially people like Palpatine or like Plagueis, is a recipe for disaster for the Force itself. And in that way, I do agree with Freddie Prinze Jr. I do agree that the Force tries to balance itself, but at a certain point it just can't, you know. I do like that every time we kind of get something, you know, bad guys win, we get 2 more Skywalkers, you know, Skywalkers win, Palpatine comes back, you know, it's always like a tug of war. And for us to keep getting movies, it has to be a tug of war. So, you know, the next time we bring in a villain that we like that uses the dark side, don't yell at me. It's going to happen. You know, just enjoy it and understand that in order to keep getting these stories, we're probably going to have this tug of war of balance in the Force and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, anyone who's with us, thanks for joining us. We're still going. We're going to go for just a little bit because Austin Fuller is going to come back. He, if anyone who wasn't here, Austin Fuller is my best friend. We've been Star Wars pals for, I mean, more than 10 years now. We met in college, and he joined us earlier to talk some of these things, and he's going to come help me put a bow on this thing, particularly with our discussion about the balance of the Force. If you have any comments about that, please leave them. Like, you know, it helps that I'm not just like spitting my opinions at you guys. It helps to have a little back and forth. Because that's kind of the point of why we're doing this, why we're doing the Jedi chat. As you all might know, there's a lot of, you know, negativity, and debate's fine, but like pointless arguments just to self-aggrandize are not fine. So we're trying to be the opposite here, get down to why we all love it in the first place and have fun with it. So feel free to comment and let us know what you think of these things. We're probably going to get off in a few minutes, but when Austin comes back, we're going to get after this balance of the Force things. I would also like to say Ron mentioned it earlier, we have interviews coming up. So we're back to doing interviews. It's not that we ever stopped. It's just, you know, getting people scheduled and getting them in is, you know, takes some time, takes some doing. So we have one booked for next Tuesday. We're going to record that and edit it and try to get it out to you guys as soon as possible. We have some others in the works that I think you guys are really going to like. I'm not going to tell you who they are. I don't think it's, you know, I think it'll be a good surprise, but we have kind of mentioned some of them before. So if you really want to know, I would dig in some of our past lives and try to figure it out. But yeah, the way that this podcast started like a year and a half ago with the interviews, we're back to it. So if there's anyone you want us to try to get on here, you know, barring like, I think we would all love to get Ewan McGregor on here or George Lucas on here, but you know, we might need a little bigger base to get those emails pushed through. So if there's anyone you do want to see though, that's maybe more attainable, like let us know, put it in the comment. That's one of my favorite things. I love doing these lives. This whole solo live thing is interesting. It's the first time I've done it alone, but I love getting on here and hearing people's ideas and talking to all the guys. So I'm going to be leading next week as well. Ron will also be gone, but I think we may have Derek and Mike here as well. Potentially Austin if he's around, but then a few weeks from there, I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks from now, we'll all be on here again and we'll have a couple of interviews out and it'll be full steam ahead. And we'll probably have some Star Wars news by then. We'll probably have some things, at least some possible release dates and maybe some information on what's coming out. So, yeah, as we approach the 2-hour mark, I want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us, and thank you for always supporting the channel. This was kind of something we threw together because we wanted to get on here. We wanted to get everyone connected, and we're all kind of all over the place. So I'm glad everyone's here. And with that being said, welcome back, Austin Fuller.
What's up?
Hey. So we've been
Can
going.
you hear me? Okay.
Oh yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Welcome back.
I had to step away for a little bit, so I didn't hear what you were most recently discussing.
We'll keep it short. You can go back and watch it. We're going. I don't know if you can see. We're on. We just eclipsed 2 hours. So I think
This is a 24-hour stream.
Yeah. So we got 3 people still on. Tell your friends to come back. But I was just talking balance of the Force and the Chosen One prophecy, and that I think it gets kind of, I wouldn't say misunderstood, because I think it's purposefully a little bit vague, but we have enough information after 25 years to know what it is. And I was trying to maybe dispel some myths or give my opinions on like what is a clean way to look at it, and then also call into question the prophecy itself. So yeah.
Give me 1 second. I'm gonna move downstairs real quick.
Okay.
Ignore me.
I'll tell you. You don't ignore me, because I'll tell you what I said.
Oh no, yeah, you ignore me.
So I think probably the coolest question to ask about that whole thing, to ask yourselves, is the prophecy actually even real?
Okay.
And could I think watching the prequels with that question in mind makes the prequels a lot more tragic. That all of this was predicated and happened based on something that isn't even real. I think it's real. I'm just saying, like, do the Jedi ever even know that it's real? Are they just kind of trusting that it is? Are they even,
do we ever get any like lore as far as like where it came from?
Yeah. We get a little bit of that in the Dooku book by Kevin Scott. He's like really into prophecies, and they're ancient, and I'm sure they come from holocrons. I don't remember, but like, up to Qui-Gon bringing it back up, they're like, yeah, I know about prophecies because we learned about them when we were all coming up. But like, I thought we didn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, because the Sith are back, they're like, oh, well, it must be true. When 5 minutes ago, they thought the Sith were gone and prophecies don't exist. And so I think it's just an interesting way to be like, at what point do they ever even really know, or do they just have this belief in Anakin, right? Like, that kind of puts a different point to the prequels, to the story of like, in a way they did table the status quo to put some faith in the fact that it was him. I'm sure there were a lot of them who didn't think it was, who didn't think he was anything.
Yeah.
But, that was kind of my thought experiment, but I think everybody left by then. So
what also makes you wonder, how many times have they done this before?
Yeah.
where they're like, hey, this is the dude prophecy, man.
Yeah.
Then, oh, well, no, it's like the doomsday clock people, where it's like, oh no, it's actually 2 years from now is when the world's gonna end. Like, I miscalculated.
Well, there's some stuff out there about how Mace Windu thinks it's him. Thinks it's himself.
Explains some like hostility and
like, if anyone could do it, it's me. Is kind of like the thing he has. I don't know where that comes from. I do know it's somewhere though.
Puts some perspective on one of the snarkiest lines in Star Wars when isn't he supposed to be the one that brings balance? Like, so the prophecy says.
Yeah. Literally, the movie before, he's the one who says that to Obi-Wan. So it's,
I think that's an interesting. I mean, like, I think you could probably do this with a bunch of stuff, but like, is it one of those? I'm gonna throw a cut at you. You're not gonna be happy.
Thanks.
Very Dune-esque.
I am gonna be
Right?
happy. Love Dune.
Have you seen it?
Yeah.
But like, just the whole idea of like someone planted the prophecy
Yeah.
to manipulate it in the future, right? Like,
Yeah.
who's to say that that's not the same exact thing? Thousands of years ago, whatever it was, ancient times.
Yeah.
The ancient Sith created this prophecy to manipulate the Jedi, knowing that eventually it would come back to bite him in the ass. And Palps has just been waiting.
I think there actually is stuff about that, like that they take advantage of it. I think that's in Plagueis. That they take advantage of Jedi superstition and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And now it's canon that the Sith had the same prophecy.
I was just saying, because I feel like the Sith are almost borderline more
superstitious.
Yeah, like weird, culty. Like they would definitely believe in a prophecy.
Yeah. And Palpatine seems to be the only guy because he, in this book that's in, he's the one narrating it. He's the one writing it. It's like his journal. It's about the Sith. And he writes in there about Darth Vader, like, the Jedi thought he was the chosen one. The ancient Sith would have probably said he's the Sith Ari, which is like their chosen one. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But,
So what, and I'd be curious, because what is I don't know if you even know this, like, what is the Sith prophecy then?
Doesn't really, I think he touches on it a little bit. It's pretty much the same thing. Like, he's the one who's going to, like, so he fulfilled theirs and fulfilled the Jedi's after, like,
yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is like the Jedi leaned into it and Palpatine's like, I don't really care if he is or not. It ends with me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, whatever. It's your problem.
Yeah. You do whatever he wants.
Yeah. So what I had said before is I've talked to you about it, that there are a lot of people who kind of talk about, because it happened this way on screen, I don't blame people. That's how I felt right away, is in Revenge of the Sith, when all the Jedi die except Yoda and Obi-Wan that you see on screen, and then Palpatine and Vader. A lot of people say, well, he did balance the Force. It's 2 and 2. I disagree. I don't think that's balance. I don't think balance is a numbers game at all. I think it's the reverse, because, I made the point that if I had if exactly 50% of my body was healthy cells and exactly 50% of my body was cancerous cells, is that balance? No. There's Chewie. So I think the reverse numbers game that I've tried to get you on before is what's at play. It more explains the situation, is that there's 10,000 Jedi out there who have a pretty strong idea of what they're doing, and one guy that is controlling everything. One guy that's controlling their ability to use the Force, is controlling galactic events, that's essentially like dipping the entirety of the Force, pulling it down into the dark side, like himself. That's the imbalance. It's the reverse numbers game, not that there's too many Jedi and not enough Sith.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I feel like we've probably talked about this before too, but it's like, and when I said Jedi are net zero and you called me a calc major and said that, I think it's saying the same thing in the sense that, like, you could have 500 million Jedi hanging out. Doesn't matter. They don't disrupt the Force
at their best.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think, because I guess the way I have always kind of viewed it is more so like, if you think of the Force as just a person, right? Or like a thing, and well, it isn't a thing, right? But the Force, it's the imbalance comes from manipulation of it, right? And I think the Jedi at their best, like you said, they don't manipulate it in a negative way. They just, it's there. It flows through them. They use it. So they don't put a negative impact on it.
Yeah.
So 10,000 Jedi just hanging out doing their thing is fine. But then one Sith comes in and starts using it in a negative fashion.
Yeah.
Boom,
Unnatural.
Imbalance. Yeah. Unnatural.
Yeah.
Imbalanced.
And it's different. Like, I want to make the distinction. It's not using the dark side. like using the dark side does not put the force out of balance. It's specifically the way the Sith do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's specifically the way that they poison it and try to control it. And like, so even Darth Vader's first appearance, when he's not even in the suit yet, he's named Darth Vader. That's not a Sith Lord. He's a Sith Lord in name only. He's just been given a license to go crazy.
Yeah.
And he finally does. And I think you could honestly argue now, the Vader comics lend themselves toward a little bit of this, but that Vader never really got like the full book on Sith training and was not really capable of it. He was capable of unleashing unchecked power that
And
nobody could
rage.
stop.
Yeah.
And so I think it really just stayed one guy, technically two Sith, but he, you know, I don't, when people say like, oh, a dark sider's around, that's not the same as a Sith. Like the Sith are doing some really, like you said, weird stuff. Weird, you know, I don't know. I think there's a distinction there.
And so I'm gonna throw in just again, not saying I even believe this, but like thinking about like balance of the Force, and because if you have the Sith who are able to, you know, tip the scales of the Force balance, right?
Mhm.
I would have to say that there has to be a way for the Jedi to tip it the other way, right?
Yeah.
Could you make the argument that like a Yoda getting the Jedi Order involved in the war tipped it too far that way, which is what caused Anakin to come up, swing it right back.
It's crazy. I literally said that right before he came on.
Did you?
Yeah, like by fight, the quote from the novelization is, by fighting at all, the Jedi lost.
Yeah,
You know,
like
their move was to actually, they had the ability, the order itself had the ability to stay out of it if they wanted.
yeah,
But they really couldn't. They're in a rock and a hard place. That's Yoda's tragedy. Is that deep down he knows he's right. Like he's
that they shouldn't be doing
Yep.
it.
But he can't. He's like, dude, like tens of thousands of solar systems depend on us.
Yeah.
Like, how are we not going to do it?
Yeah.
And we actually believe in the thing that we thought we believed in, you know? So
it creates like an interesting what if, that if like they refuse to join the army or join the war, what happens? You know, is it because it would, then the scales would be going the other way. And if you 100% believed in the prophecy and that Anakin is the person in the prophecy, him bringing balance would be the other way.
Yeah.
It would be taking down the Sith the first time to bring it back over to the normal.
I could also see Anakin's predisposition being, you know, and this is the good part about him, seeing like suffering occurring the way that Jedi, you know, we get it in the Obi-Wan show, like best way to antagonize a Jedi is to inflict suffering on people, because they'll come right out and they can't help it. Like and that was like a passionate thing about Anakin Skywalker. That was his best qualities. He was really passionate about, you know, being there. Maybe at times a little too much about being the hero.
Yeah.
But like, if there was a war going on and people were suffering, Anakin would have went and like, I'm going to go resolve this, and he would have done great at it. That, to your point, could have tipped the scales in the right way. Like, he's doing it for the right reasons, not because he's a general. You know.
Yeah.
At the flip side, that makes him just as vulnerable.
100%.
So, you know, again, it's a brilliant plan, brilliant situation. That's why it's imbalanced. But
it does just bring just interesting, like, because it is a brilliant plan, right? But where, I mean, it relies on a lot of just hoping that the Jedi do things a certain way, right?
Yeah.
Like,
he's also very good at pivoting, though. Contingencies on contingencies on contingencies. So he's like Bezos in that way. Big picture, firm on that. Details, we're okay.
Yeah.
Like, but so yeah, any takeaways today? I think we got to wrap this up.
No, I mean, I appreciate you letting me jump on a couple
Yeah.
times.
You want to come on next week?
I'll pencil you in.
All right, sweet. Put me in your calculator.
Yeah, I'll put you in the calculator, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Because there's no one I'd rather, get on my side in this group than Austin Fuller. So
Let's-
next week it's going to be me again. Ron's going to be working, but Derek and Mike may also be on. We don't
Cool.
know. It's for sure going to be me. And I want to know from our viewers, which includes you, Austin Fuller, anything you want us to talk about. So you can throw some comments out on our Instagram or something.
I'll brainstorm some ideas.
Yeah. If you liked this type of thing, we could like literally always do this. These like deep cuts and hot takes and stuff. We just probably don't want to do them all the time because we get in the habit of talking about the same stuff a lot.
Yeah.
But because we're passionate about it. So anything you guys want to hear, we do have more interviews coming up. One is for sure scheduled. We got a few in the works, but we'll start getting those out pretty soon once we do them. And I want to put this out here. See this little process? Go ahead and do that, please. It helps us out a lot. It's that simple. Let's do it again. Wow, it's just 3 clicks. Can you believe that? All right. So go ahead. That would help us out a lot. We're just trying, we want to talk to as many people as we can, and everybody doing that helps out a lot. So anything to part with, Austin Fuller?
I got no parting thoughts other than happy to be here, and I will definitely be back. That's for sure.
Happy to have you. So we'll be back next week. We're going to record before then an interview, but then we're going to get back on live next week. It'll for sure be me. Might be Austin, might be Derek, might be Mike. We might have to just do a big old debate. So, but let us know what you want to hear and we'll do it. So thank you, everybody. And good night. Thanks for joining us. And that's Star Wars Jedi Chat. May the Force be with you.